So, Eric, we got 4 questions for you. It's good to see you, by the way.
It's good to see you, buddy.
Number 1, who are you? And not like, I'm Brandon, I grew up in Colorado Springs and I like hockey, but like, who are you at your core?
That's a question I pondered a lot because I think I spent a lot of my life defining myself by what I did. Either being a professor, pastor, father, husband, things like that. But those roles probably need to be better defined at what has come out of me. So years ago, I realized I am an authentic follower of Christ who wears a very tarnished and bent halo. And so that's kind of where it came from for me. Just being able to accept the fact that I've made mistakes in my life and like that's okay.
Right.
If my orientation towards Christ is still there, then whether my knees are scraped or I've crashed on bikes and motorcycles and things enough in my life to still get back up and try it again.
Yeah.
And so I think who I am is really that. I'm trying to work out this authentic faith and not get hung up on minor details.
Yeah, that's good, man. So you sort of alluded to this a little bit, but not fully. What do you bring to the world that no one else does?
I don't know that nobody else does, but I don't think enough people do. I try to bring to the world a message that God is not mad at you. And so many people, whether they're churched or non-churched, walking in faith or not, they just have this kind of pervasive sense that either too many bad things have happened to them or they've done too many bad things, and so God's just kind of perpetually mad at them, and that's why their life doesn't work very well. And so I think the message I try to bring to the world, not just through preaching and books and stuff, but really through just the way I live, is God's not mad at you, and I'm not either. And so you can work it out. And that's been an important message. I think a message of second chances and third chances sits in there somewhere as well.
Yeah.
As I've gotten older, a lot of experiences and education and places I've been have I think a lot of things have come into convergence. And so I've realized that a lot of my life message is really that message of grace and that message of freedom. Like you really can be set free.
That's good, dude. All right, so number 3. What about your life do you hope unlocks something in someone else?
Unlocks something in somebody else. I just got a Facebook message the other day, and I'm always kind of waiting for these things to happen. Like, I don't know, but maybe people watching this, and maybe you've lived a good enough life, it's not going to happen to you, but I'm always waiting for that one thing to come back and bite me from my past.
Bro.
And it seems like a lot of times we spend our lives running from our past, but it still catches up to us, right? Sooner or later. So I got a Facebook message the other day, and it was a guy he said he met me in 1989. And in 89, I did something that offended him.
Yeah.
And what I did was, he was right. It was inappropriate. I'm getting all choked up. It was inappropriate. I basically broke some confidentiality with him and told somebody else. But he held that until 2020.
Wow.
When he tracked me down on Facebook and basically said, I lost faith in leaders at this point.
Wow.
Now, my first response was defensive and like, dude, that is really on you. You've wasted that much time, right? But that's typically what I do. Like, I can't do no wrong, but I've gotten to a point now, I have made amends enough and realized that truly, I think God gives grace to the humble if we're just humble with people. And so I responded back to him and said, you're absolutely right. And I am so sorry that you have carried that for that long, and I haven't had the opportunity to ask your forgiveness. And so I'll ask you now, for something that occurred, whatever that was, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And he, the next day, came back and just replied, you've restored so much of my faith in people that profess to be leaders in the church. And so what do I unlock in people? Maybe the ability that you can repair relationships, that forgiveness and grace and humility go a long ways.
Yeah.
And so I try to give people those opportunities, and sometimes it's not by telling them what to do, but by showing them how to do it. And so, and that kind of comes accidentally, but that's what happened with this guy, and I think that's part of what I help unlock in people.
Yeah, I mean, if I wonder if we had, you mentioned it first, like at the beginning of it, the idea that we're always sort of running from our past and afraid that it's going to catch up with us. I wonder if we had a view of our past catching up with us as opportunity for redemption, as opportunity for reconciliation, and hope for ourselves and other people. I wonder if we would maybe even turn around and face it.
Face it more, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, in reality is, I think a lot of us, we walk backwards, so we're running from our past, but we're always thinking about it. We're always looking at it.
Okay. I was going to ask you what you meant by walking backwards. That makes sense.
Right, and so even though we know God's leading us towards the future, we're still always looking backwards.
Yeah.
And it's hard to walk straight when you do that. But if you don't reconcile things in your past and learn from them and grow from them and admit that we're all human, you know, we use this phrase a lot in recovery: hurt people.
Right.
And so I think if I realize that in parts of my life with my own hurt and pain and struggles, I've hurt people, then just own it.
Yeah.
Like, let's just own it, and let's just realize that we can. It's a gift, right? Forgiveness is a gift. Reconciliation is a gift, and shame is from the devil. So I can live in shame and fear, which is a great motivator, isn't it? Like, shame and fear are powerful motivators in our life. They get us to do all kinds of crazy things. So for some of us, it gets us to behave perfectly all the time and try to be good boys and girls to make up for the things we've done, and we don't want to get caught again or whatever. And for others of us, it motivates us to anesthetize our pain, to use chemicals or images or symbols, whatever.
Yeah.
And so pain or shame and guilt are like great motivators, but they're horrible transformers.
Yeah.
Like, they don't change us at all, right?
Yeah.
They just infect everything around us. Love and grace, which I think is a real message that Christ brought. Love and grace are powerful motivators also. Mm-hmm. And we see people's lives change as they encountered Christ and his bigger story.
Yeah.
And his way of living.
Yeah.
And his acceptance and his forgiveness and his healing. They were motivated to drop their nets. They were motivated to follow him to crazy places, and motivated to, be put in prison. But it was a different motivation, right?
Yeah.
But it's also, it's a good motivator, but it's an even more powerful transformer. Like, love really does change us. Because when we learn that we are loved, that we are his beloved, that we are valued, then that sense of value and love begins to transform us inside.
Yeah.
And we walk from a whole different wholeness. So.
Right. Yeah, I think shame and silence are sort of primary weapons against us, right? Like, because when we're willing to tell our stories, there's this like threefold effect. If we look at it from a scriptural perspective, like when Revelation talks about the idea that when we tell our story, we overcome the enemy by what Jesus has done and by us telling our story. And then Romans says that faith comes by hearing, and hearing about the good works of God. And then James talks about the idea that if we confess our sins one to another, and sins, our weaknesses, our anxieties, our shortcomings, our misconceptions, our worries, when we confess those to one another and we pray for one another, then
we'll be healed.
And so when we have that sense of authentic community, which begins by, as you demonstrated, being willing to be authentic, being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to own what you've done, we get healed, we overcome the enemy, and we bring hope for other people. So of course shame, of course silence are going to be primary strategies that the enemy uses against believers and against people as a
People
whole.
in general, but yeah.
Yeah.
You know, maybe believers have even more pressure on them to pretend for some reason, which we should be the most liberated people on the planet, right?
Right. I think there's
The
this,
most
there's this
transparent.
performance thing that's just got to die.
Yeah.
We've got to figure out how to make that die. And I think it happens in those moments of authentic community where we realize, oh, Eric is a safe dude. I can be myself around Eric because Eric is comfortable being himself. That's the place where performance dies. And I stop worrying about trying to impress you and start thinking about how we can connect and start thinking about how we can encourage one another, whatever. So it's good, dude. It's good.
It becomes powerful. So,
All right, so the fourth question is this. You just breathed your last breath. No goodbyes, no nothing. What is the residue that you hope your life leaves on the people in your sphere of influence?
I hope that when I leave this earth, people are able to communicate to each other that Dr. E loved me as I was and not as I should be, because that's the way God loved him.
Yeah.
And that would really be. And I use that phrase over and over and over again in my life.
Yeah.
And the more I live from that value system, again, I think the more it unlocks people's lives to just not have to have secrets and not have to change and not have to do things in order to be loved. And so I would hope that would be the message. You know, I think tangential to that obviously would be that he loved his wife more than ministry, and he loved his kids more than anything. So that'd be my hope. So,
It seems like a pretty good
yeah, and maybe
aim.
next to that would be that Brandon would say, "I want to live my life as Dr. E did."
I mean,
That'd be the icing on the cake.
That's a
you
given,
know?
bro. That's a given. So, all right, well, dude, it was great. Good answers. This is insightful. It's helpful, and I hope that as people are watching, that they get a sense of some of the things that you're talking about today. I know that I need to more. I know that if we get these truths in our heart, they are actually transformative. So, thanks
Well,
for
that's
sharing.
what I love what you're doing though, because it's your story, right? If people live an authentic story
Yeah.
and not a make-believe story, it becomes so powerful. Their life begins to find its real purpose
Right.
in God's bigger story.
Yeah.
And so I love the fact that you're inviting people to be true to their stories.
Yeah. Well, it's the truth is they're hard lessons, right? It's hard in our performance-oriented, behavior-oriented, check the right boxes and know the right people and do the right things and filter our photos all the right way. Society, it's hard to be real.
Yeah.
But we're finding, as you have, that the more often that we are just authentic to who we are and own the story that we have, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and now in the rear view you see that even the ugly has become beautiful in its own way, which is crazy. The things that we've walked through, I wouldn't wish on anybody. But man, I really hope people get the redemptive side of it. Jen says something all the time that she's like, when I tell you my story, I hope you don't see what I did, but I hope you see what God did.
Right.
In and through that. And because of the freedom that we've experienced by learning, and still learning, to just be ourselves, I want that freedom for other people. I want them to experience the life and the joy and the peace and the terror of being fully yourself, because there's nothing better than just being who God made you to be, because that's expressing His will in a way that is profound and unique and intentional and beautiful and kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So
Powerful stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I think even in the community of people we're in, like, we don't need thousands of people to validate our stories,
right.
right? Even though we kind of rely on that now with social media and things like that, that whole vanity culture. But we need 7 or 8, 9 people around us
Yeah.
that know our stories and still love us anyway.
Yeah.
And remind us that, our story isn't about our failures.
Yeah.
I think most people, their problem is, it's not the cumulative failure in their life, it's their lack of awareness of greatness.
Yeah.
It's the lack of awareness of their purpose, their calling. And so being around people that call that out of us is really healthy, because that's the good side of the story.
Yeah.
And so I think healthy communities will do that.
Yeah.
Religious communities will tend to want you to pretend to live a different story than who you really are.
Yeah.
And so I'm thankful for your leadership and the way that you're inviting people to stay true to themselves and live into God's bigger story.
Well, as you were saying, that we need, a handful of people in our lives that call that out of us and see the beauty. Like, we've known each other for about a decade now, and I wanted to say thank you for being one of those people in my life, those people that sees the potential and not just the failures and not just the screw-ups, because they are many, they are plenteous, they are not in short supply, but you're one of the people in my life that's consistently called out destiny, consistently called out goodness, consistently called out hope and belief in me in moments that I wasn't sure. So thank you.
It's been my pleasure.
Love you, bro.
You too, man.